Welcome to the Soul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 50 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your AirPods and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Soul Patch Podcast.
Ryan, please, let's just operationally define the word Budongsan for us one more time. What does Budongsan mean? Because that's the theme of today's podcast.
So yeah, if you're in Korea or if you're coming to visit Korea, you're going to see this written everywhere. It's in every other street. You're going to see Budongsan in Hangul. And basically, this is a real estate broker. So if you're looking for an apartment, this is where you go. They're easy to identify. Every one of them looks almost identical. They have a big map of their neighborhood, and they are, neighborhood specific. So a new one just opened up in front of my house, here.
That doesn't surprise me. And there's probably one not far from it,
Yeah, and each one controls like a little zone of streets. And it's possible that a rental unit may be listed with multiple Budongsan. So it's not like I should.
They have a Budongsan agent in Korea will have relationships with lots of different building owners in that neighborhood. And so the building owners are always, letting the Budongsan know, because the Budongsan is the middleman. Like there is, I have heard of people directly renting from a building owner, but that's very, very rare.
We're doing that here.
Now you'll have to tell that story because that's definitely not how it usually works out. Usually you have to go through a Budongsan, a real estate agent, and they have relationships, and so building owners are always calling them and saying like, hey, I've got 2 rooms available. If you've got anybody, send them over to me. And you're kind of on Chuseok, the building owners are giving gifts to the Budongsan to be ingratiate yourself to them, because they're the ones who are kind of, they have the people, you have the apartments, and that there's a relationship there. So just so people
it's interesting that they have to give gifts to get just the realtors in. I figured that the fees that the realtors got would be like, that's what they get paid. Is that not enough to show people your apartment?
A box of pears isn't going to hurt,
Right, exactly.
Around Chuseok time,
I've had the opportunity to hunt down 3 different properties here. And in that process, I've probably seen, no exaggeration, probably close to 50. In all 3 instances, I had a lot of time. And normally, like if I'm back in Chicago, I would not spend that amount of time. So like per place I went to find, per apartment I tried to find, I probably toured, up to 20 places. Now in Chicago, normally I wouldn't do that. It just seems excessive. But the experience I had here in Seoul, it was a really good experience, and it was just kind of fun. I don't know what the compensation they get or what type of commission they're getting. Do you know? Because you're a little more with real estate.
Yeah. So I believe that it's like a month's rent. So if let's say, for example, the one room is in Gyeonggi, it's a little bit cheaper, right? So you could get a one room for $350 or $400, something like that. $300 a month. With Jeonsei, we haven't even talked about.
I think we should kind of get that out of the way first, because that's so important for how renting works, is what deposits are and stuff like that.
Right. Let's operationally define Jeonsei and Walsei then. Jeonsei would be the deposit. Would you say that?
No, Jeonsei is not a deposit.
No, I'm sorry. It's a large deposit.
Because deposit is bojangum, and you'll have a deposit even for a Wolsey, a monthly rent apartment. But keep in mind that for everyone listening, like for a monthly rent apartment, you're paying whatever you're paying per month, a few $100s, $1,000, whatever it is. But your deposit for that is going to be like still 5, 10 or more thousand right? It's
Right.
a lot. Whereas in the States, what's your deposit? It's going to be like maybe first and last month's rent.
First and last month's
Right.
rent, right? That's like the most they can charge you, most like legally, right?
Yeah. But not to
I
make
don't know
this
legally,
more-
but
not to
yeah,
make it more
here
confusing, I
it's
think
massive. It's
we
so
should-
much more.
Right, but I think we should back up again.
Okay.
Sorry, but I really, because I think this concept is something that most foreigners are not familiar with.
Yeah,
So when you start
let's-
talking about like, there's a deposit that's really big, it's thousands of dollars. It's not a security deposit that your landlord controls that he's going to take out of when they decide you scratch the wall or something. There is some ability. It's not the same. It's not the same. So when you make a deposit here on an apartment, a really common deposit would be 5 to 10 million won, which is about like $5,000 to $10,000.
That's a pretty small deposit.
Right, exactly. And that's a small deposit. But
yeah.
when you're putting down $10,000 and
Yeah.
you're, especially if you're a foreigner coming here to teach, you're like, what? That's like a quarter of my salary. What's going on here?
It's scary as hell, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
but
yeah.
you can. They don't have a lot of control over that. Also, the amount of money that you put down as that payment is up to a certain dollar amount. And I hate to be quoted in this because I don't have it in front of me, like current for 2021, but it's big. It's insured by the government. So when you want to go to move to another apartment, your landlord has to give that money back to you. If they don't, you do have legal recourse technically. Yeah. So anyway, this idea that Jack was starting to describe is this difference between a wulse and junse. So if you have a junse, usually this refers to an apartment where you pay zero rent.
Right.
So how do you pay zero rent? Well, how would you do that in Chicago? You'd own the house. That's how you pay
Right.
zero rent. Or you have a mortgage, which is effectively you trying to build your own equity. So you're owning something. Here you don't, which is kind of crazy. But what you can do is you can find, sometimes becoming more rare these days, properties where if you invest enough, it's not, I can't say that invest because you're not going to make any money.
You're
You
giving
lob
them
enough cash.
you're just giving them you're giving the owner of the building that you're renting from a massively large deposit, essentially, which because it's so large that you don't have to pay any rent at all. They're just now what they're doing with the money, what they used to do. See, here's why junse is a dying breed. It's almost impossible to find junse these days. What every landlord wants now is walse, because walse is a monthly payment, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So anyway, about 20 years ago, 20 years ago, it was easier to find junse. And that was the goal, is to save up enough money where you could plop it down, give it to a landlord and just say like, boom, here's $100,000. I'm going to live in your house for a year and I'm not going to pay any rent. Now, what you do with that money, they put it in a bank, they put it in an index fund.
Or building more properties.
Right. They might buy other right. Exactly. They might invest it in whatever they do, but they still owe you that 100. But it was dicey back then because you had to do a little bit of due diligence. And if the person that you were renting from, that you're going to give that junce money to, doesn't own the building, if they have a lot of debt, that's a dangerous situation. They go bankrupt, you could lose your money. And
so this is not a small thing, and this still exists today, and there are still junses you can find today. And even so this is a good situation where I am right now to describe this. So if you're working through a Budongsan, a realtor, that they're going to assist you with that due diligence to ensure that the owner doesn't have any debt. They actually have to show you physically before you sign. What their liabilities are and things like this. So if you're coming in here and you're not fluent in Korean and you don't have a lot of assistance on the ground day one, which may be the case for many people, the Budongsan is that person for you. and they're going to help you through that process. So here, when I moved into this house, which is really recent, this is just 2 years old, I felt a little nervous because I was going without a realtor. So this was like word of mouth is how I found this. And it's still the same property. Same process. I asked the owner, this is a house. So it's 2 floors, the bottom floor, the owner lives, and then me and my girlfriend, we live up here. And so she's here all the time. It's a really cute grandma that lives downstairs, and she's always drying her vegetables, making her kimchi, and just got a fish hanging and stuff. It's a lovely, lovely environment, and she's a lovely person. But aside from that, I need to know, do I feel that I can trust you? Because I have to tie up a lot of money. So for this place, I don't mind saying I put in 20 million won, $20,000.
Yeah. Now that in
Okay.
Seoul, that
So-
doesn't strike me as like ridiculous. That seems like that's a good deal, I would say, in Seoul,
Yeah.
like where you're located.
Yeah, and for the amount of square footage I have, this is a 4-bedroom. It's big, and it's a house. We have a little gated yard and stuff. So
Can I just juxtapose that with a Korean friend of mine?
But I think it's important to know, Ryan, like, I don't know if you want to say, but how much are you paying per month as well? Because just saying your deposit doesn't really tell people much.
yeah, that I'm not, because this place might get rolled again. So basically, I'm getting a sweet deal. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, because saying 20 million a month, like, doesn't really tell us very much about the overall.
But Kevin, I'm not trying to sell the apartment. What I was trying
No,
to talk
I'm
about
just saying people,
security of the
like Jack is
cash.
saying that that's a good deal.
Yeah.
It may or may not be, depending on how much you're actually paying a month.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay. But
that's
you're
not-
saying you get a
that's not why I'm
fair.
introducing-
Okay.
That was why I was
got you.
introducing the deposit. So the reason I was introducing that was to say that I have some substantial money on the line. So it's about $20,000, $19,000, whatever, USD, that I'm giving to this little grandma downstairs that I've never met before.
Right.
Okay. So what can I do to know that my money is secured beyond, like I said, I'm insured to a certain degree by the government, but I don't want to have to go through that process. I don't want a crisis, of course. So it is protected. But I asked her to see her financials on the house so I could see that she owns the house outright. So right there, that gives me an opportunity. The house is collateral. So if there was a problem, the bank or whatever could seize the house, maybe, there could be something where I would get paid back. And she has no outstanding debt, 0. So I know that that situation is pretty stable. So there are some things you do need to look into, but the realtor that you go through as a foreigner, if you're coming here, if we're still talking to foreigners, you're going to have assistance in that category. And I would not, Jack, would you, like, on day one go through, like,
Good Lord,
a
no.
realtor?
You find a Budongsan person that speaks some English, I know you can't trust everybody, but for the most part, I think they're pretty straightforward. They're, if they're running a con or whatever, they're not going to last. You know what I mean? So you look around, and it's also like, it doesn't hurt to, if you're new here, to ask a Korean professor or somebody that that you're working with or whatever to recommend a Budongsan, because a lot of times they'll have family members who own a Budongsan. It's like, oh, my sister runs a real estate agency.
Absolutely. There's so many.
Yeah.
Totally.
Everybody, there's, you take a test, you get a real estate license. It's a very difficult test, but there's a process, and these people have to pass this test and understand the law quite intimately. And so, if they're running a scam, they're not gonna last. So they have it's I think you find one and they'll take you around, and they're not going to try to, it doesn't hurt to get a little bit of help from a native Korean speaker, somebody who can just, like, introduce you to somebody or be there with you to just talk to them a little bit and get a feeling for them, because it's scary, but this is how it's done. They're going to take you to a bunch of places, and you're going to find one that you really like, and then you're going to start talking about money. How much do I need to plop down? 5,000, 10,000. What am I going to pay every month? Is it 300, 400, 500? Again, you live in Seoul, you're going to pay more the farther out you get. If you go into Gyeonggi area, it gets cheaper. It depends on how far are you willing to commute to the place where you're working.
Just like any city, it's going to depend on your conveniences, how close you are to the subway stations and things like that. And so I mean that's probably relative to most people's experiences. But I think to highlight the biggest difference, it's the idea that you will need to put down a substantial amount of money in order to begin renting. And the more you put down, of course, the less your rent is. So the first two words that Jack was using was junsei. That's like, abstractly, you can think of it as like, it's used sometimes in language among foreigners anyway, as being the money that's put down. And then the wolsei is the monthly rent.
Junsei is like, if you translate it, it basically says you're chartering. It's like they use the same word for chartering an airplane. So if you want, you could say you're chartering the apartment.
Right. So something to not freak out about, though, if you're considering a move here and you're new to the scene, if you go through a Budongsan in one of the international neighborhoods, or really if you like Itaewon, or really if you walk into any Budongsan as a foreigner, they have this understanding that you probably are not expected, that you're not ready to drop 10 grand. And they're going to try to direct you to places that have smaller deposits. So my first apartment was through Budongsan in Itaewon. The realtor spoke English, the whole office spoke English. And I eventually got a place for 5 million down. Most of my friends were doing about the same. That's like a 1 bedroom plus living room, place. Quite good deal. I think it was better than what I'd pay in Chicago, living in Wicker Park, if anybody knows Chicago. So comparing Wicker Park to Itaewon, better value. And when I signed that lease, I did have the opportunity to drop it all the way to 1 million, which is $1,000. So they would have taken $1,000 deposit only, which is probably very feasible for most people if you're planning on coming over here. And the rent, though, would have been, I think, an extra $100 a month or something like this. So by putting in that extra money, I saved $100 a month.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Now, for a lot of maybe our listeners that are Hagwon teachers, this is also what's happening within the Hagwon. You're just not doing it, but the director of the Hagwon is giving a deposit to some apartment, and they're paying your monthly rent, or they're putting in a big junsei. And when you're living in that apartment, this is all happening. It's just that you're not involved in it. Now, if you were to work at a Hagwon, and then after a year you decided, I want to work at a university, and then the university said you have to find your own living space, then you're going to have to go through this process by yourself. And so
that's a good point too. Most like Jack saying Hagwon. So just to recap, in case you're not listening to all the episodes, it's this language to us now.
I know.
Interchangeable Konglish. But a Hagwon is a private school. So like a tutoring academy, something like this, after school classes.
I mean, probably 80% of the jobs in Korea are Hagwon jobs, language institutes.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to start out.
Right. And if you do the contract, like 99% of the time comes with benefits, including housing. So you have an apartment already lined up for you. And that's what he's talking about. You don't have to stay there. You can negotiate that with your boss, because whatever they're paying for it, they'll take that money back. If you just like, I'll just use my salary, and then they'll probably give you a salary boost or something. You go find your own place. Usually that kind of thing's negotiable. But if you're in a situation like public schools, I think it's the same thing. They give you
schools, they give you an apartment, they provide it. So they're, at least in some of those, like, I don't know what we call EPIC programs or whatever, they're doing the same thing. They find a Budongsan finds an apartment, they put down the deposit, they pay the monthly rent for you.
And if you're really coming here, I'm trying to imagine the different types of people that are coming here. If you're like a contractor, or if you're a student, if you're a student, you're going to have a lot of these things set up. If you're a contractor, the company that you're contracting with, they're going to have these things set up. If you're fresh out of university and you want to do the ESL thing and you decide Korea is your place, yeah, it might be enticing when you see an advertisement that says, hey, it's going to give you housing, and it's like, oh, it's one more headache I don't have to deal with. I wouldn't write it off that quickly. It's not that hard to find a place. Like Craigslist, Craigslist exists in Seoul. It exists in Korea. So you can find roommates that are other teachers doing a similar thing. You don't have to commit to something just because it's offering you that as a perk. Though then again, it's probably included in most things. So
I just think like most people don't want to. It's just scary. It's scary enough moving here for the first time. It's just kind of like I said, I think I said this in like maybe 15 episodes ago. It's like a life in a bottle. You know what I mean? Like it's just like you just pop the cork and you're, here's your house, here's your salary, here's where the school is. Be here at 10 o'clock on Monday. And and it's just like, yeah, I mean, everything is just done, for you. And that's not a bad way to initiate yourself to the country. I mean, just like,
that's a good point.
I think it's a really comfortable way. Now, once you're here and you decide, could be something more long-term, you might want to go out and look for something that's a little bit more, like not, because after a year contract, you might have 10 grand. And so you could say, all right, that's a deposit that I could put down, on an apartment. And it's
not just to have more space. It's not just, hey, I've been here for a year, I want to lush out and have a ton more space. But after you've been living in Korea for a year and you decide you're going to stay for another year, being able to it is investment in a way. Being able to put more money into your deposit helps you roll down your rent. It's a way to invest your Korean won without having to flip it to USD and get it into your IRA or your stocks or whatever you want to do with your money, your savings account. If you want to be able to do something with your money here, it's a really good way to go. Like between this apartment and my one in Itaewon, I had one that was supposed to be a transition for a very brief period of time, but I stayed for a long time because it was just such a great value. Mm-hmm. I put down 45 million won, $45,000.
Yeah.
And it reduced my rent to, I think, because we reduced once and then I stayed again. I think I opened at 200 and that's all bills included. There was like internet, all utilities, everything, $200 because I put down $45,000. Yep. And then I think by the time I left, it was $150. I negotiated it down. In fact, they came to me asking to negotiate up and I was like, I don't have it. I said, oh, I'll have to look for someplace else. And then it was like this weird thing where they actually knocked $50 off. So how that happened. But picture this. So in the same unit I was in, this is just a really small studio apartment, super tiny, like 100 square feet. I'm talking tiny, like a dorm room, basically. So that same unit, if you put down the options, I could have put down only 5 million. But if I do that, then the rent there is $650. So if you think about it, you could take your savings that you make after 1 year, and if you can find a situation where you can even put in, maybe you don't have 45,000, maybe you have 20,000, you put in that into your deposit, you're rolling down your rent. So if you're saving $200 a month on your rent, well, $200,000 USD. I keep going between won and dollar. So you're saving 200 a month on rent because you invested 20,000. You're getting a percentage, exactly. And then
yep. Yeah. I mean, this is exactly this is the ladder that people climb. Now, right now, Korea is in an interesting position where a lot of young people are unable to even, they can't even the threshold to enter into it is too high. It's out of their price range right now, and it's a social problem right now. But 15 years ago, when my wife and I first got married, that's exactly what we found. An apartment, or she found an apartment. I was useless. But we threw down, we only had like, I don't know if we had, I think maybe we were able to scrape together 40 grand. And so we put in 40 grand as a deposit. And then we paid $400 a month of rent. And then over the next year, we would just grind it. Okay, grind. And we were able to knock it up to 60. And then that 400 came down to 300. And then we grinded. And we were able to add another 20 at that. So we had an $80,000 deposit, and our rent went down to 200 a month. And so eventually we got to a point where when we moved out to Gyeonggi, your money is worth a little bit more out here. At least it was 10 or 11 years ago. We finally got to the place where we were able to slap down the jeonsei, which was our ultimate goal, was to, here's like 100 grand and no rent, which to me, it just blew my mind. I couldn't understand how that's a thing, you know? It just doesn't seem, it just seems bizarre. I'm like, if you have 100,000, why don't you just buy, a house?
It's kind of a double-edged sword though. Like it goes two ways. It's like, I think a lot of people hearing this might think, well, that kind of sucks though. Like if you put down $200,000, but you don't have any equity, what does that mean? Like, can you borrow against that? I think you can, because it's tied into your deposit. So I think you can borrow cash against that. I don't do that here. Yeah. But so you do have some, you can leverage, I think, but it's not yours. So if that property increases in value, you're still only getting out 200. But on the other hand, you're guaranteed that 200 on the day you move out. You don't have to sell, and all the repairs and everything. That's not your deal.
It's not my deal, man. I remember our water heater broke.
Weird hybrid.
In our very first apartment, our water heater broke, and the owner came, and then the owner's mother, the Harmony, came, and she's like, you're paying for this. This is you. My wife's like, what are you talking about? They say, we don't own this place. It's your place. Your water heater broke. My water heater did not break. I don't have a water heater. You have a water heater. And so eventually the owner was the daughter, and she settled down the Harmony, but the Harmony was like, she was really hell bent on us like paying for the, their water heater. And I was like, that's asinine. This is you own this place. I don't own this place. So that is one of the benefits of it. I think the ultimate goal for a lot of people is to build that jeonsei to the point where you can actually buy something of your own. That's the kind of Korean dream, right? It's like, okay, the next jump from a really, really large jeonsei is a deposit and then a mortgage with a bank. However, in Korea, you have to put down a substantial amount of a down payment to qualify for a mortgage loan. It's much higher than in America. I mean, the US is like, 10 years ago, before the financial crisis, the subprime mortgage, it was like zero money down, like adjustable rate interest. Yeah, no job, no, what they call them, ninja loans, like no job, no income, no, here's a house, have two, have three. And that worked out well. Korea is, quite different. They're very, it's a lot harder to secure that mortgage. But once you own that property, then it really is in Korea. If I were to say, like, how do you build wealth in Korea, real estate is probably higher on the list in the hierarchy than, let's say, stocks. But in America,
I think
I would say it's the reverse, but or equal, like investing in the stock market or buying, doing real estate. I think both are ways to generate wealth. Like, buying a house is a way to generate wealth in America. But also I think that investing in the stock market is another way that people have success. I think here it's a little bit riskier, so people really like the real estate. That seems to be where they gravitate towards.
And when you think about that concept of the bigger deposit you put in, the lower your rent is, you're in that situation, you're not speculating, right? You know exactly what you laid out, and you know exactly what you're getting. So that's a guarantee. And you're getting that benefit every month because your rent is knocked down every month. So you can see how that's pretty enticing. I once did the math on that little place I had, which was in Sangdo, next to our university. So in Dongjaku, if anybody knows Seoul, you're looking at a map. They had a lot of the place I moved in, I was the first person to live in that building. So it was all brand new. Why am I talking about the value? That wasn't my point. The percent you're getting based on what you put in. So like I had 45 million I put in, $45,000 roughly. I always keep saying dollars, it's easier. I think originally I had looked at the contract putting in 30, and then I went up. There was like every like 10 grand I threw into this thing, they knocked off like $100.
Yeah,
some equation.
Same for us. Yeah, our first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be different depending where you are and what type of property you have here. We had talked about changing it after the first year, but like I said, the owner I think is like 86. She's very old, and she benefits more from monthly rent than anything.
Well, and here's the thing is, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when Junsei was much more attractive because the interest rate at banks was much higher. It has gone down and down and down and down to the point where Junsei is basically dead, to be honest. I mean, what landlords want now is walsei. They want the monthly rental payments because it's more lucrative than just putting in the bank. You get nothing. You know, there's just no, the interest is just too low. I ran into, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
please.
I just remember having a conversation with a professor that used to work at our university, and he told me, now this sounds too good to be true, but he said some of the interest rates at banks at that time was over 10%, 20 years ago. Does that seem feasible to me? I mean, that just seems like impossible. But
well, if you go back to the U.S. and was it the 80s? Mm-hmm. Where interest rates, you didn't have to invest anything, just put in your savings account. Yeah, I think people are like 8-9%.
Right. I mean, this was happening, I guess, probably prior to the IMF crisis in Korea when the economy collapsed. But before that, I think people were getting just putting in the bank. You could get, it was worth it. Just give me the big payment. I'll put it in the bank. I'll collect the interest. You don't have to pay rent. It was a very, quid pro quo, kind of nice agreement, like the current, slowly over time, it's really kind of disappeared. And so I'll give you an example of like what a junsei is today. I have a friend, a Korean professor friend, and he just told me that in Budong, for his apartment, his junsei is $500,000. $500,000. That's what his junsei is. I mean, that I just don't think I could even fathom that as an American, having not lived over here. It doesn't shock me as much, but I remember again, like about 19 years ago, I had a friend from Ireland, and he and his wife got an apartment, and he told me that their junsei was $70,000, and that number just blew my mind. Like I'd never seen. I'm from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. I'm from the Midwest. $70,000. Who has that lying around? I'm sure there were, but I mean, it's just I'm from a middle class family, so that just seemed like such an absurd amount of money to me. But having lived here for a while, like when you're talking about like, I plopped down 45,000, 50,000. I mean, these are huge numbers. I think. Yeah,
it's a big number for something you don't own. That's what's weird about it, right? And it took me many years before I was comfortable doing that. Why didn't I do that when I arrived here? I'm not comfortable giving a landlord. Even my first deposit was $5,000. I'm like, you guys serious? Is that what we're doing here? And it's everybody's like, yeah, that's the game, dude. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, like there you
Am I gonna
go.
see that again?
Yeah, like, yeah. What's your name? Come back here. But after becoming familiar with the system, I realized that I was kind of shooting myself in the foot. It's like, here I am stacking up savings, and oh, that's what I was going to say. So for the individual, if you're looking at using this system as a basic investment, so return on your cash, it'll be different depending on where you are in the city or where you are in the country, what type of property. But in that place, which was a studio apartment, so I'm trying to picture it, it's a brand new, so it's nice because it's new, but it's cheap because it's small. In that place, I had worked it out. It was about a little less than 6% you're making off of what you had. Now, of course, you're not compounding it unless you're doing anything with that cash you're saving, which then, you could take out. And if you're an American or whatever, you could, split it back off to, your Roth IRA back home, or whatever investments you have, or use it for whatever you want.
Go to Itaewon.
So you're not compounding the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
but in that moment, so you're getting, I think it was like just shy of 6%. So it's not bad.
No.
Consider that to get the money out of here. Even with the best means, you're still going to get nicked on exchange rates, transfer fees, and then whatever fees it is to get your money into whatever brokerage you have, or maybe there isn't one for you, whatever, and then you look at like an average of, what can we hope for these days, so I think it's a viable thing, even if you don't have, even if you're just coming over here as a teacher, you're going to be here for more than 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest, like, if you can scrape together an extra 10 grand somehow in that first year, the next year, you could be saving money per month if you can find a way to apply it, which would be finding one of these places that allows you to put a bigger amount of money down. But as Jack was saying, they're kind of disappearing a little bit.
It is kind of disappearing. Yeah, I think that just based on the fact that the interest rates in banks are so low, that putting in the bank is just not going to be as lucrative for the landlord as collecting the monthly rent. But you're the farther out you get, if you're willing to live in Gyeonggi province instead of Seoul, or you're outside of Seoul, you're going to find much lower deposits. So like you could put down $1,000 or $2,000 and then pay $250 or $300 a month for a one-room apartment. That's definitely possible. So you're going to get much better deals the farther out you go, and that's so just remember, Seoul is a little bit of an enigma. It doesn't translate to the entire country. You can get much better deals outside of Seoul. So
yeah, and if your purpose is just for working, if you're not looking for like a regular nightly social life and things you got to be doing all the time, living outside of the city is not that big of a deal because transportation here is pretty awesome. Like one of our coworkers who had worked at the Ansong campus, we have a satellite campus that's south of the city. It's in a different city. He had worked there, went back to England, and then came back. And when he came back, he changed to the Seoul campus. So he's working at the Seoul campus. He still decided to live in Ansong. Mm-hmm. So he's outside the city by a good distance, but he can manage it because there's buses, there's trains and stuff.
I think he lives about 5 minutes away from my house, and
that's where you're at.
I'm like 10 minutes away from my job. He works at the Seoul campus. He's like, that's a 2-hour, one way.
It's not walking distance.
Yeah, I mean, but you just hop on the bus, and then the intercity bus, takes you right down into the express bus terminal, and you're on your way to and the Seoul campus. It's not a big deal. I think you get more for your buck. You get more bang for your buck the farther away you're willing to commute. And so for some people, especially if you're like a nester, If you're really a kind of a homebody and you want to live in somewhere with a little bit more space and more comfort, there are, Suwon is not that far. Anyang, I mean, these are areas that are.
I think Suwon, you take the train. That's like 1 hour.
It's like you can take the train right to the center of Seoul, Seoul Station. I mean, it takes you half an hour or something. Just take a rest. Listen to
when you compare that to when you compare that to getting around in other cities, and when I left Chicago, it was many years ago, and I've heard that they've improved their transit system. Honestly, I haven't been back since. I don't think I've been down to Chicago since like 2014, maybe 2013. It's been a long, long time. But when I was living there as a grad student and working shortly thereafter and before, was around 2006, 7, 8, like that. No, 2005, 6, 7, whatever. Back then, I was living in the Wicker Park area, going from, I was actually in Logan. I'm saying Wicker Park because more people are familiar with it.
I've heard of that. I haven't heard of the other. Yeah. You weren't in Caprini Green, were you? I heard of.
No. Though I hear that's actually supposed to be nicer now.
I think they, yeah.
So people that don't know Chicago, let's just make it simple. I lived north of city center. My university was Loyola, the graduate campus, which is city center in the Loop. And then I was a bartender, and I was working on the west side. So I had this triangle that I just ran around the city. And each one of those legs, I just always budgeted. It's an hour to get anywhere. That's just how Chicago works. It takes you an hour. How long to get to work? Hour. From work to my office on campus, 1 hour. From campus to home, it's 1 hour. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
In Seoul, I have a similar kind of feeling. I can say that, but it's going to push me so much further. Like in an hour, I can really,
you can get somewhere.
Really
yeah.
So you don't have to be like in the middle.
Like if you want to, go to Seoul and enjoy Seoul, you could live in Incheon. It'd be easy. Incheon's got a line number 1 shoots right into the center of Seoul. They have fast trains that skip stations so that they get you there faster. So there's a lot of you don't have to live in Seoul. It's not an absolute necessary. Even if you want to spend time in Seoul and enjoy it, you don't have to live there.
Yeah, it depends how involved you want to get with, I would say instead of looking at areas to live based on just the cost of rent, I would look, the city is so massive. Like one of my buddies I was on a little bike trip with, and we got caught out in the rain, and we looked on our phone apps and it says it's not raining in Seoul. And then we realized that the weather app was actually, the city's so big, it has different weather, that's how, it's a massive, massive city. I would suggest look at neighborhoods and learn which neighborhood you want to live in. So the city, just like any city, it's all divvied up. Think about New York City. New York City is an easy example because everybody knows the boroughs. And within each borough, you have neighborhoods. So you can apply the same thing here. Absolutely. A lot of foreigners coming in, they're like, I gotta live in Itaewon. Well, if you do want to hang out with a lot of other foreigners, maybe that's your jam. Like, and maybe like jamming is your jam. Maybe you like music, and it's going to be much easier to find foreigners to play music with than other Koreans initially, and maybe even always, because most foreigners have a lot more free time in general.
Right.
And of course, language and things if you first arrive. So if you want to get involved with playing music and you're like a 25-year-old person just arriving in Korea, you're gonna want to live in Itaewon. You'll be hooking up with people to play music with like that, and you're going to be able to like hang out every night directly, be a walking distance from your home to your friend's home like this. But if that's not your priority, if it's like what Jack's saying, it's like if you still want to be in Seoul every weekend just to hang out, if you want to enjoy the cafes, the bars, and the clubs and whatnot, the tourism, whatever, yeah, absolutely. You could commute it. And I know other people that have done this. And I think it's more teachers that I've known that have lived here for longer periods of time live at greater distances from their workplace,
right?
Which doesn't make sense. You think you would move closer as time goes on.
Yeah.
but it seems
But
to be kind of the opposite.
the farther you kind of radiate out, the better deals you find. You just find
Yeah.
that, and there are, sometimes it's nice to live in a quiet neighborhood and then go
Mhm.
into the madness and then come back out.
Yeah.
Did we lose Kevin? Kev, are you
I'm here listening.
oh man, okay. I was just wondering if you had any opinions about location or whatever. You said
Yeah,
you're
living out a little bit is definitely nice. I like the quiet.
yeah.
Hey, Kev, how long have you been out there?
Like 7 years at this point, about. And I'm still in Seoul, of course.
Yeah, you're like right on the edge though, right? Like you're north, like northeast-ish, just slightly east, but
Correct.
mostly north, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And you're on the end of the train line or the second to last of one of the.
Oh yeah, one of the lines of line 6. I'm on like that's the Itaewon line actually, so it cuts right through the middle of the city.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
so
We're
for
just about at the
Kevin,
end of that line.
Kevin's way out, but how long does it take you to get to Itaewon?
To Itaewon, 40 minutes from home.
Was that 40 minutes? 45
Yeah.
minutes?
About.
Yeah, so check this out. Where he lives, he's got mountains. Like, I mean, I've got Namsan behind me, but that's not a mountain. I mean, by Kevin, you have like mountains.
Yeah, I mean, there's mountains all around the city. There's mountains in the middle of the city, just about as well. Seoul's crazy for mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what was your history though with like you started at Hagwon, so did they just have a apartment set up for you, like you just moved in?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
they just gave me one. I just showed up on day one. They picked me up and they're like, "Here's your apartment." I was like, "Cool."
And what about when you switched to university? Was like it was your
No,
responsibility
they gave
to
me an
find a
apartment.
place? They gave
They
you an
gave me an
apartment?
apartment as well. My first time there. Yeah, they actually asked me. I remember in the communique they were like, "Have you got 50 million to put down?" And I was like, "Is that right? Are they really asking me if I've got 50 million? Because of course I don't have that." But then I was like, "No," and they were like, "Okay, don't worry about it." And then they just ended up covering it. So that was just all. They covered that for me as well.
What
It
was the
wasn't
first
until
time
I
that you
moved to
had to?
Chungang.
Oh, I'm sorry. When was the first time you
Yeah.
had to like sort yourself out though?
It was when I moved to Chungang. It's when I
Okay.
moved into Seoul. That's when I
And
had to get my own place.
what was the process though? Did you use a Budongsan to?
No, I had some friends that wanted a roommate, and so I went. I did the whole roommate thing for a little while, again, in the Itaewon area.
Now, did you have to sign a contract, or was it like you paid them and then their name was on the contract?
No, I think I did. It was a long time ago. Of course, I don't remember exactly. I'm pretty sure I did have an official contract. I think it was me and the roommate I moved in with. We moved in at the same time, and I'm pretty sure it was just like we signed our own contracts for that. And there, I think we put very little down in deposit, and we were paying mostly just monthly rent because it was like right in the center of. It was a really nice place in Itaewon, actually. It was really cool.
Oh, nice. Like
Yeah, it was big.
I guess another word that we haven't talked about is pyong. Pyong is like is how they measure
It's the square
apartments.
footage. Yeah.
What is 1 by 1 pyong? Did
Well,
anyone know that?
I know 6 pyong, like 5.5 pyong is like roughly 100 square feet. But here's a warning for you if you're again coming from abroad. There's a few words that are used interchangeably that don't mean the same thing. So, like for example, the difference between like what you'd call a studio or a one room, it can imply different things depending on your interpretation of that. So also with square footage, if someone tells you that it's going to be like, hey, this is 13 pyong, and you type that into Google and you get square footage and you're like, hey, that looks pretty good. They may or may not be including the bathroom, the balcony, like some spaces that are like marginally usable.
The
that was my
parking
experience
space?
in many places. Yeah, the parking. I never got the parking space included in the floor plan, but I definitely had this experience where it was like, depending on who I'm talking to, they're like just cutting off the bathroom, or they're adding the bathroom, or like this. And
yeah, they play numbers with those games. Kev, was your place in Itaewon, did you guys have like a 2-bedroom? Was it
It was like 2.5 bedroom actually.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was 2.5 bed, and we had just one bathroom, of course. Yeah, it was definitely nice. We had a nice rooftop and everything to hang out on, but it was not cheap.
I bet
per
it's
month. We were
totally
paying,
unaffordable now, though,
yeah.
right? Like it would be.
Oh, well, actually, the last time I went through Itaewon and walked through that building, just because I was curious, that building is gone. There's a whole new building there, but I'm sure it would be unaffordable even if it was still there. Yeah.
Okay.
Although Itaewon like has gone down quite a bit recently. Like a couple of years ago, it
Yeah.
was crazy expensive, and then just in the last couple of years, it's gotten down to cheap again. Not that I've been there in a while, but
Yeah,
the prices are
Oh,
tanked.
I didn't know
the
that.
hipness, the hip area has been kind of like evolving. What do you say, west from Itaewon? So I wasn't here, but my general understanding was prior to when I lived here. So in like when Jack, when you were here, Itaewon proper, like where the Itaewon station is, Itaewon Strip, that was like the foreigner hangout, which is based on
It's a
like
dirty,
yeah, it's
petri
where
dish
the
of,
military would go to do military,
depraved.
guy
It was
things.
fantastic. It was great,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then leading out of Itaewon, it goes towards Noksapyeong Station, and that forks into two different hill roads that go up towards Namsan, which is the center mountain on every map that you can find, a really tiny but very central mountain. And these two little legs that stick up, one is called Gyeongnidan, and the other one you're going to hear more commonly called HBC, Haebangchong, but it's called HBC by most foreigners. Gyeongnidan, when I moved there, it was called Veggie Hill. It was Veggie Hill, like vegetables. Yeah, because I guess that's where maybe they had a lot of markets and stuff. There's no markets anymore. Now it's all, $8 Americanos. So when I moved there, it was before that transition. We still had the market there. And it was reasonable, but it was getting like gentrified. And now the new shift is the neighborhood I'm in now. And fortunately, like I said, I found a deal here, which is great. There's still plenty of deals in this area, but this is sort of where you're seeing more of like the newest cafes and restaurants, and the hipster invasion has started, basically is what I'm saying. So I'm in Huam, in front of Seoul Station. So it's just kind of like,
You were there before. It was cool.
Yeah, twice.
It's like Brooklyn or something like.
Pacing me.
Yeah.
I'll be in like Incheon by the time I leave this country. But it's actually kind of nice being on that edge, because for purposes of this house, we got a good deal. And then just really quickly, it's just like new restaurant, new cafe, Still, the average age in this neighborhood is like 60. It's still a very geriatric hood for now, but it's changing. Like I used to be the foreigner here. Like if you go outside, I mean, I'm the white guy, like in this whole neighborhood. Not anymore. Now I see foreigners here. So it's changing a bit. And sometimes if I'm on the patio, if I'm people are walking down the market, I'll hear English.
Okay.
Or Chinese. I think there's some Chinese people living in the next building, like not just like a person. I think there's like a little community of people that are from China. So it's evolving here again. So do a little research if you're looking for a place. Don't just base it on your economy. Like it's cool if you want to save a buck and live out in the sticks, but there's a lot of different sticks. Even that, depends.
Would you guys recommend roommate situation? Like, do you guys have any horror stories? Like, any roommate horror stories or landlord horror stories?
I mean, I would say roommates, it's the same living in the States or living here. If you want to like roommates, it's nice living alone. Roommates make things cheaper, and it's a little bit more fun to have somebody to bullshit with. But yeah, it's really personal on if you want a roommate or not. It worked for me for a little while.
I think I would have liked it. A lot of my friends, when I came here, they had roommates. A couple of my friends had no leases. They were just, crashing in a room. Some other people had a house, like it's pretty common on like HBC, a lot of those like red brick jobs, they'll have like 3-bedroom. And two people can afford it. And yeah, you just sublet that room. And yeah, I mean, early days, I knew some people that are freelancing here, doing really just about anything, from translation work to, I don't know, illegal, just cash jobs.
Right.
You can
Bouncing
find
private
other
lesson to
other
private lesson.
expat pirates looking for looking for a roommate. So no deposit, just pay the monthly.
I had a friend, a guy that I taught with, and then I left and I came back to Korea, and he had like this like open living room, and this guy was living in his house. He was renting it, but there was no room. So this guy he put two bookshelves like in a kind of spaced them apart, and was like living in this like closet where he had like a kind of a drape as a door, and these two bookcases were
Was he just
basically what's that?
Is he just squatting? Did he just
Well, he was paying a little bit of rent to my friend, but my friend was renting this
nice.
it's a pretty big apartment. It's kind of like what you're describing in Itaewon. Like it was a kind of it had a big patio outside, and it was like a villa. It wasn't a big apartment complex, but it was a villa. A villa is like, well, how would you describe a villa? Like a 3-story building, basically 3 or 4-story building.
Yeah, less than 5.
Yeah. That in Korea they call those villas. They tend to be a little bit older than the big massive apartment complexes. The 15-story edifices. Those are very quite new usually. But it was, you see all kinds of
there's a big trend for people moving. Like a lot of people prefer those big apartments. Korean people at least prefer those big apartments. I like the villas a lot more because like you've got roof access. They're generally like family owned or something. Like they're a little bit more, they've got a little bit more
character
feeling to them.
Yeah,
character to them. But apartments, they're becoming more and more popular. People don't like living in the villas because the apartments, even though when you live in the villas, like it's still taken care of by the owner of the apartment and everything, or of the building. The apartment, just everything is completely taken care of by this big company that owns everything. So it's a lot less stress. So people are like, I'd rather live in a 20, 30-story apartment.
Yeah, we
there's
haven't.
no character. There's nothing there.
We haven't
it's
talked
comfortable.
about,
it's easy.
We haven't talked about what that big place is called. We skipped a whole term here. Office Tel.
We haven't
talked about Office Tel.
Right.
Yeah, that was the first place I lived in Korea ever, in Busan. I lived in an Office Tel.
If you're single and you want to live like by yourself, the Office Tel is the best. I think those kick ass. I love those things. Describe an Office Tel. Like how would you describe it?
Well, I mean, it's you can see it's the 2 words, right? Office, hotel, maybe. So these exist if you are, let's say you're Korean and you're living in Daegu or something. You're in the middle of the country somewhere, and you have a family, you have a house, a property, but maybe for temporary time you need an office space in Seoul because that's where all the business is being taken care of. So maybe 5 days a week you go to Seoul and you need to live in Seoul because you're working in Seoul, and then on the weekends you're with your family like this. That's, I think, a common case for a lot of office tels. So these are extremely efficient. You're going to have a really tiny built-in laundry machine. Your kitchen will be like 2 little induction burners, maybe 1. Everything modern, nice, new, just like Jack said, everything is taken care of.
Usually a loft with a bed, like it's about like 4 feet high. You can't stand up in it, but you can sleep up there.
So the bottom floor is like all open. It's a
very cool,
extreme efficient, kind of futuristic looking. Most of them are. The utilities are going to be way better than living in a villa. These villas that we're talking about, that you would find like in the Itaewon area, they're these old buildings. They're going to be lots of character, lots of square footage, and a lot of leaky windows. You'll end up paying, a couple $100 for heating it every month. But in an office tel, usually you're going to have all these things bundled. It's just basically with the price.
Mm-hmm.
The deposits will be smaller, as far as I understand. You're less likely to have like a large. I don't think there's any junseis for office tels.
And the office tel, like one of the best things about it is the first floor and the second floor are most likely going to be just businesses. So there might be like a doctor's clinic, there might be a pharmacy, there are restaurants, there are, all dry cleaners, like everything you could want is
Oh
like
yeah,
right
that's a good
there,
point. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
So yeah, the building I was in was 22 floors and I was on the 21st. So I was way up on top. That was really nice. So one thing that was nice, I had an ocean view. I was in Hyundai, beautiful view of the beach.
Oh wow, office
But
telling Hyundai, yeah, that
yeah,
sounds
it was
great.
really cool. But
Yeah.
it also wasn't very cool because like if I want to go running, getting out of the building's a pain in the ass. Like, like if you want to bring your
Yeah,
groceries, like it's a you're really disconnected from the ground, is what I'm saying. Whereas with a villa like here, I mean, my house this is a house, but it's kind of like a villa. I got a little concrete patio, and we had dinner on the patio tonight. So
yeah.
we're sitting in the patio enjoying dinner. We got the market, the lights, everything. It's beautiful. I have my garden and stuff. But yeah, in the office tell you're probably paying about the same amount, getting half the area, but tons more efficiency. And like what Jack was about to say is the bottom floors, maybe like not even just the bottom, but like the bottom two or maybe even three, there'll be the restaurants, your 7-Eleven, like it's all made for convenience.
And you could order food and they're just up there in a second. They just hop in the elevator, bring your food, deliver it to your in front of your
Yeah.
door. I mean, it's fantastic. So I would say like hire, like you start with the villa and the one room, and then the office tel is kind of the next step. And then the family, where families live in Korea, would be apartments.
Yeah, that
apakta,
sounds
right?
right.
Does that seem like I don't know, the
The
trajectory or
rainbow.
whatever?
Yeah.
Like
I might go
um
office tel to villa. I get the reverse that order for me.
well that happened to us too. I never told you guys how, like, why we ended up in a building. It had
Yeah.
to do with really, really crappy neighbors. So we had finally transitioned to an apartment. We decided, this is like, I don't know, like 12 years ago or whatever. We're like, we're gonna buy an apartment and again, it's in we're in Gyeonggi, so the prices are in Seoul. How much is an apartment, like a 35 or 40 pyong apartment in Seoul? Is that $1 million?
And
$2 million?
It depends on if it's new or not, but it's probably going to be about that. And something important to know is like buying those apartments, especially buying them like when the buildings are first built, is really, really difficult. It's like you're on a lottery to
Exactly.
be able to buy one.
There
So
was the
even if you have
opposite.
the money,
Oh,
it's
sorry, go ahead.
difficult to be able to buy it. No,
Even if
that's
you have it right, it's like you right, you have to, there's so much demand
Yeah.
that
And it's
they
mostly,
can't
it's
keep
not even
up.
people living there. It's mostly people buying it just to keep it, just to sell it in a year once the price doubles.
It's an investment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could go into all the government regulations that the way they try to stop that from happening, but it's so that's a whole other podcast probably. How the government but anyway, so
yeah,
we built up our chunse to the point where we finally had enough to make a deposit, and we finally purchased our own apartment. And that was like a really scary step, because but the difference was they were really looking for people to buy. It was the opposite of the Seoul situation. It was, more supply than demand. So
Mhm.
we ended up getting a quite a good deal on it. I think it was like 40 pyong for 280, something like that. And we had a mortgage and everything like that. And we just we did what, the other thing I think that's weird between, I would say, difference between like America and Korea is in America, you got the 20-year mortgage, the 30-year mortgage, the 40-year mortgage. That's not Korean style. I don't know, Kevin, what would you say is the average like mortgage for
I have
in
no idea. We were unable. I got turned down for every mortgage we had tried to apply for any loan I tried to apply for.
Oh,
So
okay,
they
okay.
wouldn't like me as the foreigner when I went to banks.
I don't know how we swung it. We must have just barely gotten like to the threshold of like enough of a down payment where we were able to secure the loan, but it was very difficult because I was a foreigner. It wasn't necessarily easy.
Yeah, I was basically just like, they looked at me, they were like, for it, and I'm like, sorry, no can do. And so
maybe
it just wasn't happening.
maybe my wife just told me to stay home that day. She's like, single
I'll
woman
handle
looking
this.
for an apartment. But we were able to buy out here, and the only reason we were able to is because it's in Gyeonggi, and because they're really trying to build up this area out here in Pyeongtaek, and we lived there for a couple years, but we lived on the 15th floor, and on the 16th floor, I swear to God, it was like a family of, I don't know, vampires or something, because like literally at 1 o'clock in the morning, the little kids would wake up. Like that's when they got up. Their kids got up, and they would run from one end of the apartment to the other, and it drove my family insane. Like to the point where there was like a couple of stories back a few years ago where like people murdered their neighbors, the noisy neighbors. You guys remember that? It's like there's like a couple of deaths. Yeah, they like get in an argument, like you're being too loud, and it ends up in like a knife fight, and somebody ends up dead. And I think that became such a problem in Korea that they even made a law like you're not allowed to go up and knock on someone's door. You have to call the security, and then the security calls them. And we tried this, and we were just finally at wit's end. And so we just decided, like, we got to get out of here. We can't take it anymore. And what happened was we got really lucky. We started looking around this neighborhood right before, this is like 10 years ago, right before the neighborhood started to grow. And there was a woman who was really needed to sell her building. Like she had to give some money to her sister because they were buying another building somewhere else. And so she was really desperate, and we didn't have the money, but we had the apartment. And so we're like, well, what if we gave you our apartment, and then we took your mortgage, and then we'll pay on your mortgage. You get to live in our building, and then you get to live in our apartment. So it was one of the just craziest, like 1 in a million. That'll never happen again. Where you can actually trade. So that was a very bizarre situation to find ourselves in, where we actually traded. So that was how we ended up in a building. We really had no intention of doing it, but our neighbors above kind of drove us out, and it ended up being a good situation. So I should send them a thank you letter for being terrible people. And
your current building, how big is your current building?
So our current building is just it's a villa, 3 stories high, and we live on the 3rd floor, and we've got, I think, 9 rental units in the other one. It's mostly 1 rooms with a couple of 2 rooms in there, but like they're all filled right now, but there are times where they're not filled. A lot of buildings are being built in this area. I mean, that's the the bane of the landlord's existence, is like you're always worried about getting it filled. So you're always trying to build relationships with Budongsan people, because they're the ones that have access to the tenants. So you have to keep a good relationship with those people. And so it's an interesting lifestyle. It's an interesting perspective to what we end up doing, I think, is dropping the deposit down quite low. So we have people who are paying only $1,000 deposit, and like $300 a month. So that's, most people could swing that, like $1,000 down.
Man,
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that I think like landlords worry about is, what if somebody trashes it or whatever, if the damage is more than.
How long have you been managing that property?
So we've been managing this property for about 9 years, 8 or 9 years.
Have you had, maybe we could turn this into another episode, be like Jack's slumlord life stories. Like,
right, yeah. The worst situation that ever happened was,
what's the worst?
This one was pretty messed up. the Budongsan said we have just like one person, a cook from a restaurant. What it ended up being was it was like 6 or 7 cooks. These were people, foreigners from other countries, that were sleeping in shifts, 12-hour shifts. So you're talking like 10 people sleeping in a little tiny studio apartment, like pencils in a pencil case, and in shifts.
Right.
And and when I went in there, cockroaches. They brought the the worst kind, the German ones, those like kind of
Armored.
yeah, the jackboot, the little mustaches. No, it was it was awful, and we had to call an exterminator, and thank God it didn't go to like the next room over, and we got rid of that problem. But it was, I mean, when I walked in there after they left, like when they were gone, I was like, that was
Jack, I think one thing that I really like about the system here is that it protects the renters generally. Like in the States, you rent an apartment and it always seems like the apartment is trying to screw you out of your deposit in any way possible. Whereas here, you're pretty much guaranteed to get your deposit back. But in that case, you got kind of screwed there. Is there any recourse like for the building owner that if the tenants are just they totally trash the place, that you're able to keep some of the deposit? Or
in that case, I think what my wife did was negotiate with the restaurant that was that had the guys, and they're like, look, this place is messed up. Will you pay I think it was like $120 for the exterminator fee? And they're like, yeah, we'll pay it. So, but like a lot of negotiations in Korea, it's like after the money has already been paid, then the negotiation starts. That's weird, like in America, it's like, I already got your money, so like piss off, man. Like you're screwed. But here, there is still a room for negotiation after the money has already been given. I think one of the biggest differences maybe between back home and Korea is that there's no expectation for you to leave the place looking clean and nice. It's like it's messed up when you leave and you look around and you're like, I'm out, And when I left my apartment in Los Angeles, I had to literally scrub and clean, and I mean, I was going to lose parts of my deposit if that thing wasn't exactly the same. I mean, they told me flat out, if you don't leave this exactly the same as you came in, you're not getting that deposit back.
Oh yeah, I forgot my place in Songdo, when I got this, because this was a deal of a moment, right? So I wasn't ready to leave the other place. I mean, I was ready, like emotionally to leave. I wasn't ready. It was my contract wasn't in the right place. So, and I wanted this. So when I jumped ship, because another great example of the flexibility, putting down bigger money. So because I put down $45,000, and because my monthly rent was only $150, that's a subletting opportunity. So I made money. So I made money on the last half of my lease because I subletted the apartment.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, how much did you charge the person subletting it? What did you charge them?
So for the deposit, I think it was more than 1,000. I feel like I was like a weird number, like it was 1,000. I want to say 1,600. And then of that deposit, I allowed it to be used for the last month's rent also. And I think I was charging 600. So, God, I can't remember. But what I wanted to say about that wasn't just the economic benefit, which, so there's a good example. If you put down bigger cash, you can start subletting to people that don't have the bigger cash. And it gives you the flexibility. If you want to move, you could easily, in a city of, tens of millions of people, you can find somebody to fill it. The girl that moved in came as a recommendation from a friend and vetted, whatever. And so I had no worries about her. And very nice girl. I had stopped by there a couple of times. So she had some issues. Something like the burner was broken or something we had to fix. So I got to peek in and see she's taking care of the place. She treated the place nice. I mean, how much can you screw up a small apartment? But I mean, you can. And so in the final time that I'm going to see her, we settle up everything. And then it's like, all right, so tomorrow you're going to be out. She's like, yeah, cool. And I had, this couch behind me, this is a pull-out bed thing. I had that in that apartment. So now I'm just using it for a couch here in the studio, but it was, that was the bed in that place. And she had bought it from me, and then I bought it back from her. She didn't want it.
Yeah.
So it came over here. So I had to go and pick it up. So I'm going back there the day after she's left. And I told you, this has been a great relationship. She's taking care of the place. Everything's groovy. We return, the remainder of the funds that I had to give to her. Everything, bills settled. We're happy. I had a prorate, the utilities, everything's fine. And I go into the apartment, like there's half a box of cereal. The refrigerator's still filled with food.
Yeah.
She left all of her soaps. Like, it was just kind of like, there's a frying pan on the stove. I'm like, okay.
No. That's all good. That's all good. For us, like we just hire, you hire a cleaning person to come in, and they just either they take the stuff that they like, or whatever they don't like, they just chuck in a garbage bag, and that's part of the agreement, is that there will be, you have to pay a cleaner to come in. Usually, I don't know about that situation that you're talking about, but I think usually landlords will just pay a cleaning company to come in and clean it up so that it's ready for the next person to look at it. So, and
I know this.
Yeah,
I knew this.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went looking at so many apartments over the years here, when you go into these apartments, they're always effed up, So it's not surprising. I mean, I've been to apartments with like dirt on the floor, it's like, it's obvious. Like, and they're like, oh yeah, it'll be clean before you move in. It's like, yeah, somebody left it like this. So I know that, but I still had the impulse, like, so that girl, she leaves.
Was she American?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'm subletting. So I still have to seal the deal finality with the owner. I still cleaned the whole place.
It's your Midwestern sensibility, man. Like you cannot.
It feels weird. Like it wasn't like I want to be the good guy. I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it because I don't want someone to see my shit.
You take the guy out of Wisconsin, but you can't take the Wisconsin out of the guy, man. I know that impulse of like, I just can't do it this way. Even though it was totally kosher, if you had left it all messed up, you just couldn't do it. Yeah, that's funny. I understand. Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah. What's the turnover like in your apartment?
So I would say, the best case scenario is you want someone to stay for a year, but do people sign 6-month contracts, people sign 1-year contracts, but it's rare that you get someone to stay for like 5 years or something like that. We did have one woman who lived here for about 7 or 8 years. And that was, she was just kind of like a fixture, like she just, and then they finally left. And it's always it's a rat race, man. You're just going to Budongsan and you're trying to, we got this person leaving at this time. Do you have anybody? No, we don't have anyone. And so it lays dormant for a while, and it's just it can get frustrating in those times where you have empty rooms for longer periods of time. And then all of a sudden you get there's a kind of, all of a sudden you fill up, and it's just it's a weird, it's just luck and timing. And I would say that's what from a landlord's perspective is what we're, dealing with. But as long as you treat people, you got to fix stuff when it's broken. You gotta be honest about it, if something is not working, get it fixed, call a handyman. And I've had good experiences in my history with dealing with landlords. I don't know if you guys have any bad experiences.
All good.
It's all good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Up and down.
Yeah. Well, anyway, because I know some people have had bad experiences, but that's true everywhere. That's kind of a universal thing, I think. It's just yeah. All right, man. That was we did it. talked about the real estate. I don't know how illuminating or elucidating that was for our listeners. I hope it was helpful for those who kind of have no idea how the system works over here. But thanks for joining us on the patch tonight. If you want to find us, you can go to all the big platforms. We're on Stitcher. You can go to our homepage, which is the Soul Patch. thesoulpatch.com, SEOUL patch.com, and you can download everything on there. Apple. We're on Stitcher. We're on Spotify. We're on TuneIn. If you want to watch us on YouTube, you go to the YouTube channel and hit subscribe. We need more subs, and you can like the video if you enjoyed it. And the really big thing is if you can give us a review on Apple Podcasts, that will really help us out. And we're always waiting for email from a listener. Hit us up at is that right? No, what am I talking about? thesoulpatch@gmail.com. Sorry, I got confused between our website and our email. thesoulpatch@gmail.com. So shoot us an email, and thanks Brian, Kev, thanks guys.
Very nice.
We'll see you next week on the patch. Thanks everybody.
I like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today.
Nothing gear.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
The quiet man.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Dopamine. Jim.
It's all my love. It's all my love. It's all my love.
The brain.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Hey Bobby. Let the bass go. Call me an eater, call me a dominant.